Hello, everyone, and welcome to the, what is a kind of, a very exciting and first-time event for Open LMS. You're listening to the voice of Ladek right now. It's my dearest hope that you have heard me on the eLearn podcast, in the eLearn Success series, or any of the other number of events that we've had here. But the reason why it's super unusual is twofold. One is because we've never had an event like this before in our company's history. And the second is because we've never had, sort of a keynote of this sort of, super awesomeness at this stage as well. And so, I'm actually going to bring everybody on the stage right now. I'm here with both Phil Miller, our executive director, and Dr. Britt Andreatta. How are you today, Britt? It's so nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, and lovely to connect with you and the many customers that you serve.
Absolutely. Phil, and, here's the interesting thing. Again, I still, I'm old, but I still marvel at the technology stuff that we have here today. I'm sitting here in Mexico City. Phil, you're actually in Singapore, I think, right?
That's correct, which means it's 1:30 in the morning, and I'm super jet lagged. But I was telling Stephen before we went live that I went down a little bit of an Excel rabbit hole just a few minutes ago and didn't realize what time it was. I don't know if we've all done that, but then I realized, oh man, I really don't want to miss this announcement of our keynote. So I figured, why not? Let's just jump in and give it a go. So
fantastic.
Hotel room, late night hotel Wi-Fi from the other side of the world. That's what's going on tonight.
And Britt, where are you at?
I'm in Santa Barbara, California, which is a little north of Los Angeles. But Phil definitely gets the prize for middle of the night commitment here.
not a prize I'm interested in winning, but
so let me start with this. We're going to be, what we're talking about here is what we're calling our Connected 2023 conference. It's our first in-person conference ever for our company. Our company's been around, in its current form for about 2.5, a little more than 2 years now. We started just before the pandemic. The companies that have, comprise Open LMS have been around for 15 some odd years. As many people know, but we're so excited to actually, bring our clients together, bring people in, and actually meet everybody for the first time. And with that said, I want to actually formally introduce Britt Andreatta, and here she is. She's an internationally recognized thought leader who uses her background in leadership, neuroscience, psychology, and education to create science-based solutions for today's workplace challenges. She is the CEO of Brain Aware Training and the former CLO for lynda.com, which everyone else now, and we all know now, is LinkedIn Learning. She has over 10 million views worldwide of her online courses, and she regularly consults with organizations on leadership development and learning strategy. That's not all. So she's also authored these books, right? She's authored Wired to Grow, Wired to Resist, and Wired to Connect. And teaser, I think there's going to be some opportunities at Connected to get some of those.
Britt, are you feeling perfectly uncomfortable now that he just keeps rattling all this stuff out?
Well, in 2022, she was named a top influencer in learning. And in 2021, she was a top 20 learning influencer and a top 20 HR influencer for leadership development. So I mean, you tell me, Phil, but I think that it goes without saying, we're pretty excited to be announcing her as both our opening keynote speaker, but also you're going to be facilitating a leadership workshop. And so, Britt, I want to kind of give you the stage here for a second to just talk about, what is it that you usually put into a leadership workshop, and like just kind of without giving away the store, what does it look like when you put one of these together?
Well, I always customize it to the audience. So I know I'm going to partner with you and Phil on asking your attendees what is top of mind and what's keeping them up at night. Where do they feel a little stuck, or where would they like a little inspiration? So we're going to use that data to craft something that's very unique to this experience. But inevitably, the top issues that show up again and again in the orgs that I work with are change, and more change, right? We just can't seem to stop the onslaught of change, right? It's just constantly going to be there, but we know some things about how we can help people thrive through change, why people naturally resist change. And once you kind of understand the biology of that, you can do a better job of preparing them and supporting them to move through it. Another thing that comes up is teams, belonging, inclusion. I love that you're bringing people together. We've been hungering to be together. It's been a really hard, 2.5 years where we haven't been together. And there's all kinds of our biology that's wired for in-person connection. So I'm glad that your attendees are going to get to experience that again. And we'll talk about how you can leverage that to really bring out the best in your organization. Strategy, vision for the future and navigating the unexpected and being able to prepare and execute. These are kind of typical top themes that come up again. And another one that's just really in the moment right now, people are still dealing with burnout, trying to heal from burnout, recognizing burnout in themselves and their organization. I'm hoping by the time we get to February, maybe that's less of an issue. But if it's not, we'll have some ability to help people with that. So we'll listen to your attendees and find out what they need. But I always bring a science lens and then give people real practical strategies they can use right away when they walk out of the room.
Phil, you tell me, you and I've seen you at a couple of conferences recently. I know that you're in Singapore to actually be at another in-person event. What's the hunger for being together with other humans?
Well, I mean, for me personally, I think it's huge, but I think we're seeing it at conferences now as well. I mean, in many cases, we're not all the way back to pre-pandemic levels, partially because of travel budgets and these types of things that are just going to take a while to come back in. But the energy that you're feeling at a lot of these conferences. I mean, we had EDUCAUSE a couple of weeks ago, DevLearn a couple of weeks ago, and the numbers were getting back to normal. But I actually think the energy and the interaction was higher. And one of the things that we've been really excited about with the Open LMS Connected conference specifically, and one of the reasons that we call it Connected is actually because we have such a diverse client base, right? Some of the largest universities in the world, University of Barcelona, University of New South Wales, Louisiana State University, community colleges like Oklahoma City Community College, North Carolina Community College System, and then a bunch of like corporate learning and associations that are training their members and nonprofits that are training their volunteers. And one of the reasons that we're so excited about it, and I'm really excited about, both Britt's experience as well as her approach to these types of things, is actually putting those people all together and talking about learning and talking about skills and talking about leadership. Because I think that too often we get into our own lanes. Here's the corporate learning track, and here's the higher education or the K-12 track. And I actually think there's a lot of benefit to be gained from actually driving the conversations with these people together. And Britt's experience, I mean, both from the higher education perspective, the corporate learning perspective, I just think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, there may be some uncomfortable conversations in there, but that's actually, I think, a good thing. So I'm delighted about it. Not to mention the fact that, when I'm not traveling, I'm in Indiana, and Phoenix in February is going to be, much nicer than Indiana. And nothing against Indiana in February if you're somewhat cold-blooded like I am, but to see the sun from time to time is a pretty good thing as well. So I'm excited. I wanted to call it one other thing. We have at Open LMS in our leadership training that we do with our executive team and our management, we have a very specific definition of leadership. And I think Britt captured part of it. The first bullet point in our definition of leadership is leaders drive change that creates new value. So it's not just about, reacting to change, which I think we've all had to do. But when we think about leadership, and especially in the learning space, leaders really have to go out and actually drive change. They shouldn't be just reacting to the world around them. They should be actually helping instigate that change. And I think those conversations that we're going to have at the end of February in Phoenix are hopefully going to drive some change, right? And I think we're going to have a lot of leaders together. So I'm really pumped to make all this happen.
Britt, sorry, go ahead. You sound like you already were ready to go, but I was going to tee you up to talk about that confluence of higher ed plus, the corporate space, and whether or not are they really that different? Like your experience, you've talked at so many conferences, you've worked with so many leaders. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, a lot of people forget or don't always hone in on the fact that I was in higher ed for 20 years. I was a professor and a dean at one of the top research universities in the world. And then I was the chair of the bachelor's program at a small liberal arts college that has several campuses across the United States. So I have navigated the education space in multiple ways. And then I jumped over to corporate. And There are some differences. There are some differences in how those organizations navigate change, driving change, how fast they can move, what all is involved, who their stakeholders that they need to answer to are. So there are some differences, and I can speak to that. But at the end of the day, every organization is filled with people. And this is why I love bringing a neuroscience lens to everything I do. It's when we kind of understand how humans are wired and what our core needs are and how to bring out the best in people, how to help them rise to their potential. You really then enliven and turn on the maximum capability of your organization, no matter what type of organization that is. So I consult with higher ed organizations all the time. And while the way we go about it or some of the pressures might be different, the core issues are kind of the same. So that's why I love your organization, because we're going to actually have some different types of audiences, which typically you wouldn't see in one conference, are going to be together. And I think that's going to make a really rich conversation and a really great opportunity to share wisdom and best practices.
Take me to, you kind of have a host, like a host of topics that you put on the table in terms of your keynote. I know we're going to custom build the leadership training for the executives that join us on the first day. But I know, I think you've been a speaker on and the events that I've run 2 or 3 times. I know twice, but maybe 3 times. And you're always one of our top speakers. The way that you put it on the table, the way that you put your knowledge on the table, the way that you customize it for the audience, inevitably the feedback is Britt was amazing. What are your favorite topics to talk about when you do a keynote? The different places that you pull from your books and from your research. Talk to me a little bit about those different types of topics so we can kind of tease what people might hear when you're speaking. Yeah.
Well, I mean, 2 things. As I mentioned, some of the topics I mentioned earlier are kind of perennials, right? Change is perennial, teams is perennial. At the same time, I really like to stay on the front edge of what is happening today in organizations. So I've been doing a lot of research and sharing data on burnout and quiet quitting and the Great Resignation. So I've been doing a lot recently on purpose and this, everyone's going through this surge in post-traumatic growth. The pandemic has been a traumatic global experience, and people can have a response that's post-traumatic stress syndrome, but the other way humans respond is post-traumatic growth. And I see this huge hunger in the workforce, regardless of what type of industry you're in, for more purpose and meaning at work. And that's driven by some very specific moments that are happening in our culture, our global culture today. So I've been talking about that. I'm writing that book right now. It'll be out by May. And then, things crop up. So I'm always kind of keeping my ear on what's happening now and what do people need to hear about. So it'll be a little bit mix of kind of what we hear from your leaders, as well as what I'm noticing in the just across industries and the workspace, and stuff crops up. And I try to dive right into the research and bring kind of what we know and some practical applications so that people have some tools right away. And then of course it changes over time, right? When I wrote my first book, the very first book I wrote was Wired to Grow, which is about how the brain learns. And then 5 years later, I did a second edition. And the joke was on me because I chose to do a second edition because I didn't have a lot of time in my schedule that year. And if you change 20% of a book, you can call it a second edition. Well, when I got back into the research, so much had changed in what scientists understand about how the brain forms memories and how memory drives learning that I had to rewrite the entire book. It was 80% new material. It was a huge rewrite. So the other thing is that, what we know keeps evolving. And that's really exciting to me. And I like to bring kind of the latest findings and the latest things that scientists are discovering so that we can all look at it together and go, what does this mean? This is really intriguing. So it's going to be a kind of a combination of those things.
Phil, I want to put you on. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was telling Stephen just the other day, when we were together at Educause, I'm the father of 4 kids. I've got 7-year-old triplets and a 9-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They're all in a bilingual school right now. So 80% of their day is in Spanish and 20% is in English. And one of the things that's really been, and you're going to have all the science behind this, Britt, that as a parent, I think we must all go through it because I'm going through it right now. You just have this realization at various ages throughout your kids' growth about how humans are actually designed to learn, right? Like, and children, and the thing that's really just struck me is, like, I know that there are things that actually change in your brain as you grow up, but there are also just attitudes and behaviors that as adults we start to put in that actually get in the way of learning and growing. And I've been thinking a lot about, both me personally, but our organization. And I hope, as we go into the conference, maybe this is one of the things that we talk about as well, is how do we just kind of set ourselves up to learn more effectively by removing some of those barriers. And I mean, I know we can't, they say, again, I've done a lot of research on this when we decided to go bilingual school with our children, is, there are actually physical things that change in the brain at a certain age, in late childhood. We can't change those, but we can change our attitudes and our behaviors and our approach to learning. And so this idea that we can kind of work on that both individually and as an organization, I'm really excited to see that. And I think it'll be a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for sure, the brain definitely goes through these key changes, right? And the more we learn about how the brain learns, both for child development as well as adult learning, we absolutely can do a better job designing learning experiences and learning institutions. We can do a better job of consuming learning and supporting our own learning journey. What I like to differentiate is humans are wired to learn. Learning is how we navigate the world. We're constantly learning, and big parts of our biology are dedicated to doing it all day, every day. And then we have education, right? Which is a societal construct that had certain goals. And when it was first built, and a lot of the policies and practices that you see in a lot of educational institutions don't align with how the brain actually learns. Yep. And so we need to modify them. We need to modernize them. And then, of
let's
course,
take that a step further, though, Britt, and talk about, because we're getting together to all clients and community around online learning with a platform like Open LMS. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of institutions and companies that, in March of 2020, took a whole bunch of things that they used to do face-to-face and shoved them up online. And now I think so many of those institutions and companies are going back and realizing, okay, we did the best we could in this emergency situation, but now we need to go back and think about this again and actually, try to make this really work for our students or for our learners. And there's kind of okay, we did it, awesome. But now let's go back and actually make it effective, to your point about really addressing how we learn online. And I think there's going to be a lot of great use cases from around. But what are your perspectives on that kind of like both the peak there, March, April of 2020, and then now what are effective organizations doing to actually go back and make it effective, as opposed to just the emergency kind of pull the ripcord that happened back then?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think the beauty in that emergency moment is it shoved a lot of organizations past their resistance. Like they just had to.
10 years of progress in 2 weeks in many cases.
I mean, there one futurist, Amy Webb, says that we did a decade of digital transformation in just a few months. Like it was just this massive shoving forward. And so that's great. And we can't undo that. Like that breaking the seal on, okay, we can learn online and these things can happen has happened. However, taking something and just shoving it up online while you may be able to continue classes and things kept moving forward, that's not the same as designing it for that format or that platform and maximizing the tools that make that the most effective, right? So there's definitely a lot of going back and tinkering and improving that I think we can all do. I'm so grateful, that we got through that. I have a child too. And so we were doing Zoom school and, education kept happening, but those classes were not designed as Zoom classes, right? And so there's a difference between emergency pivoting and actual designing for the maximum benefit of the learning journey.
I have so much respect for, my son, who at the time was first grade, his teacher, Mr. Torres. I mean,
oh my gosh,
for somebody that wasn't trained, was obviously pedagogically trained, but not how to teach a first grade class online. And the Montessori teachers that were for several weeks and months trying to teach Montessori sensorial learning with, a bunch of 5-year-olds, just a lot of respect. But yeah, it's now that hopefully people have had the time to pause a little bit, I do think that there's just so much work that we can do to take that progress and then both make it better and then solidify it into the way that we actually learn and the way that we teach and train in our organizations. So I think there's going to be some great conversations around that at the conference as well.
For sure. And the other thing that I would say is that while the human brain and body is designed to learn, and we actually hunger to learn, all of us got scarred by school at some point. You don't make it to adulthood without some scarring from the educational system. Even the most well-meaning experiences can become negative because, I mean, the brain, literally the teenage brain, completely rewires itself during a few short years, which is why they're so moody. And it's we're in the middle of that right now.
I was just going to say,
I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, no, it's real time. And then I'm like, we're teaching them to drive right now. This is not a good idea. And then, of course, adult training. You know, I go into so many organizations where people are like, I don't want to go to training. And it's because they've gone to bad training. And they've now kind of got a label for like training's not good. It's like, no, it can be magical and amazing and incredible.
And in the online world, that like we've all had that, you know, I just clicked the box a bunch of times and then, you know, knew that I had to get 9 out of 10 at the end of this or whatever. And so, yeah, there's some experience of that in the online world as well. And we've got to reset those expectations, right?
For sure. And, you know, and there's so many amazing tools and opportunities. I also want to caution everyone around, you know, don't get so excited by bells and whistles that you throw it at everything. Like sometimes the best learning tool is a PDF. Don't throw VR at that. Like if a PDF will solve it, that's fine. So also assessing form following function and making sure that you're choosing your tools and maximizing those use of tools and using them in the right way.
And I also just say, I as somebody who, you know, we sell tools that help with online learning, but our tools are also used for hybrid and face-to-face support, right? Don't forget that there are times where learning happens best when we're together, right? I mean, that's why we're getting together in Phoenix, because we think there's a reason and a rationale for people to sit down and not just the learning that happens in the formal ones, but we can't forget about the informal learning that happens both online, but also in those face-to-face experiences, the things that you learn when you know, go grab lunch with a coworker or something. Those things matter too. And so we have to think about, to your point about the tool, it's not just the tool, it's the method and the methodology for, I mean, there's the hybrid, and now they're talking about this high flex model in higher education, kind of the new buzzword at EDUCAUSE last week that we're all starting to talk about. So we have to think about when face-to-face is important and hands-on is important as well. And then kind of leverage that and weave that into how we think about learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever I go in to do any kind of learning within an organization, there's the hour that people will see me, or the 5 hours or whatever I've been engaged for. But I always design the pre-experience, the experience when I'm with them, the post-experience. It's all designed very thoughtfully to be a full encompassed journey, not just the moment I'm with them. And I love to help other educators think about that, because oftentimes the best aha moments, the real shift in their perspective, or that moment of insight that really permanently changes the brain, happens after they walk out of the session you just did with them. And you can do a few things to really enliven and increase the chances that opportunity will happen. And we know insight is the stickiest thing that the brain can do, because once you have a moment of insight, you don't ever unsee it. And so I think it's so great that we have so many tools, and I'm excited to talk to folks about how to really maximize those tools.
One of the things that, just to be, so that everybody understands, the conference that we're having in Phoenix, the Connected Conference, while we're going to have some keynotes, most of the presentations are actually going to be by clients and community members that are actually sharing their best practices as well. And it's not just insights that helps reinforce learning. When you actually share those insights with others, that actually reinforces learning as well. And so we've got lots of proposals coming in for presentations and other sessions that will be, as we're building the agenda out, we'll fill in. But I think this idea of being able to share, we hope that we're going to have a lot of our international clients as well. And we do have some different experiences, both historically, but also as people went into and out of lockdown differently. I think there are going to be some topics that come up that are going to be different from institutions or companies that are from different parts of the world. I think that idea of sharing best practices and you know, while we're super excited to have you as our keynote, we're also really excited to see presentations from our clients that are doing interesting stuff around the world.
Me too. And I think that's such a great way to, when we see some creative things that other people are doing, it absolutely boosts our own innovation. So I think that's a great model.
Fantastic. On that note, I encourage everyone to think about what kind of insight are you going to walk out of the leadership session with Britt Andreatta, as on February 28th when she delivers it. Or maybe how are you going to be inspired by her keynote on March 1st as she opens up the general session for us and takes us into that. But
or what insight do you have from learning that you're going to share, as at the Open LMS Connected conference and on March, I guess it would be March 1st and 2nd or whatever.
Exactly. So
let's get logistics here, Stephen. I think you need to bring us home with some logistics.
So I'm gonna thank Britt, because I'm gonna put up a slide here and it's gonna take all of us off the screen. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today, Britt. We're very, very excited to have you as running this leadership workshop for us, as well as being our opening keynote speaker. For everyone else, the Connected conference is on, I believe it's right here. It's in Phoenix, Arizona on February 28th to March 2nd. So February 28th, March 1 and 2 in Phoenix, Arizona. You can go to openlms.net to sign up and get a ticket from there. But other than that, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us today, and we'll see y'all in February.